anvil and hammer strategy. And the Thebans used it, but Philip started to use it as well. And you can use this with discipline, okay? If every soldier knows his or her role in the army. And with coordination, you can also have the idea of flexibility. Okay? So remember, the Greeks fought using the hoplite phalanx, and that's it. But what Philip understood is, hey, if I have coordination, I can change my strategy and tactics according to the enemy, right? So he had different units. He had archers. He had shield bearers, okay? People whose job was to hold shields. He had phalanx, and he had cavalry. And in response to different enemies, he would change his strategy using these different units. Okay? Does that make sense? And so as over time, this army, if you have these three things, mobility, coordination, and flexibility, you'll be invincible. No one could beat you, okay? Because the very idea that an army could do this at that time was unheard of. Okay? Does that make sense? All right? So that's what he learned in Thebes. It is possible for you to transform your army in a way that makes it highly disciplined. And once you have discipline, it will become invincible. Okay? So he became resolved to take all this education and transform the Macedonian army. Okay? He got his chance in 359. Okay? The reason why is his brother died, and the brother's son, his nephew, was too young. So he became regent. Okay? He became the sort of placeholder before the son can become of age. Okay? But once he became regent, he basically became de facto king for his entire life. And as regent, he was determined to transform the Macedonian military. And at this time, the Macedonian military was getting destroyed by everyone, okay? Illyria attacked and destroyed the army. Thrace attacked and destroyed the army, okay? The Macedonian army was a complete joke. And he became determined to transform it. And what he recognized is, if I want to transform the army, I need to turn it into a meritocracy. Okay? Meritocracy. So traditionally, because in Macedon you have a nobility, it's always all decisions are made by social status. Okay? So a person rises according to his social status as opposed to his merit. And Philip was determined to change that. And the thing that he did that was extremely controversial was he made the cavalry, which was full of nobility, equal to the infantry, which was made of commoners, peasants. Okay? So in this new system, as long as you perform well in battle, you'll be promoted. Okay? And one of the people he promoted very heavily, and who would become his most successful general, his name is Parmenion. Okay? I want you to remember this guy, Parmenion, okay? Because he would basically become Philip's partner in war and his greatest general. Even though Parmenion, he was born into lower nobility, okay? He certainly had some money, but Philip treated him as a partner. And he allowed Parmenion to lead armies on his own. He was not afraid that Parmenion would rebel, okay? He trusted Parmenion. Okay? So Philip was a tremendous, he had tremendous understanding and judgment of people. He knew who to trust, and he knew how to use people effectively. The other thing that he did that was very important was he needed to make the army loyal to him. And what he understood is, if you want the army loyal to you, you need to do three things, okay? The first thing is you need to fight with them. You understand? He was not in the back watching the battle. He was in the front leading the battle. And he was training with them every day. He trained harder than everyone else. In fact, in one battle, Philip lost an eye. And he had many battle wounds and scars. Okay? And so because of that, his soldiers were fanatically loyal to him. Okay? And also because Philip was fighting with his soldiers every day, he did not want to risk the lives of his soldiers. You understand? He was very strategic. He would not put his soldiers in harm's way. And so his soldiers became even more loyal to him. Second thing that he did was he ate and drank with them. Okay? These common soldiers, he would spend his time just eating and drinking with them. And that told the soldiers, hey, we're equals, we're friends, and I'm willing to listen to your complaints. Okay? Here's your opportunity to complain about commander. Here's an opportunity to complain about me. I'm willing to listen to you. Okay? Does that make sense? And the third thing was he was an excellent communicator. He would give speeches explaining his vision, right? He wanted to make Macedon great. He wanted Macedon to conquer all of Greece and then conquer Persia. He wanted glory for his country. Okay? But not only that, but he praised people like Parmenion. Okay? He used his speeches to praise soldiers that were good examples. And obviously that made Parmenion feel really good, right? And that made him even more loyal to Philip. Okay? So Philip, over time, was able to build a strong, loyal, unified, disciplined army using these strategies. Okay? So the other thing that Philip did was he started to, while he was starting to build his army, his enemies were still attacking him, right? And what he did that was counterintuitive was he basically negotiated. You understand? He used diplomacy. He understood that having the best military is just a... let me rephrase this. Having smart diplomacy is just as good as having the world's best military. Right? Does that make sense? Because remember, at this time, it's basically Game of Thrones. Every nation is at each other's throat, okay? And they hate each other, okay? So Sparta hates Thebes, Thebes hates Athens. They really didn't get along, okay? So what Philip could do was use diplomacy to build alliances against other enemies, okay? So he was using diplomacy a lot in order to buy time for him to train up his army. Okay. He would also marry the princesses of other nations, okay, as part of his diplomacy. So Philip was known as a great strategist, but much more importantly, he was known also as a brilliant diplomat, someone who knew how to negotiate and deceive his enemies. Okay? So after he started to build his army, he started to make his move, okay? The first thing he did was he basically secured his northern frontier. He got into these wars with his enemies to the north, and he secured his northern frontier. That's important, okay? Because he wants to move into the south eventually, but he needs to make sure that he's not attacked from behind, okay? So that's the first thing he does. Second thing that he does is in 347, he invades a city called Amphipolis, and he conquers it. This is important because Amphipolis has gold mines. Okay? Now he has resources, he has money. And with these resources, he can pay his soldiers, right? Because his soldiers are training every day. They're not farming. They're training every day. So he can now pay them. He can now buy the loyalty of the nobility. And he can stir national sentiment in Macedon by building projects, by building roads, okay? He can improve the economy, okay? And the last thing that he does with the money is he starts bribing everyone, okay? He basically starts bribing the nobility of Athens, other nations to support him, okay? So he's being very strategic and very clever. In 356, his son in here, Alexander the Great, is born to his wife Olympias, okay? And the last major event is in 338 BCE, is the Battle of Chaeronea. This is the last battle between Philip and the people who opposed him. So in Chaeronea, the two nations that oppose him are Thebes and Athens. But at this time, the problem is the great generals of Thebes have all died, okay? And Athens, Philip basically brought the aristocracy to support him. So Athens didn't really put out a great army. And in this battle of Chaeronea, Philip II, with his modern, highly disciplined, loyal army, destroyed everyone, okay? He crushed Thebes, he crushed Athens, and he united all of Greece. So he destroyed the entire army of Athens, and he almost destroyed Thebes. But what happened was, when it was clear that Thebes was about to lose the battle, the sacred band of Thebes, okay, stood in the way. Okay? They basically sacrificed themselves so the other army, the other soldiers of Thebes could escape. Okay? And so the sacred band of Thebes was forever destroyed. And the irony, of course, is it's the sacred band of Thebes that taught Philip how to build a great army. Okay? And in his last act, he destroyed the sacred band of Thebes, and now he united all of Greece. Now that he united all of Greece, his ambition now is to take his army and conquer Persia. Okay? So what he did was he sent his great general Parmenion into Persia. Okay, remember in Anatolia at this time, which is today Turkey, there are lots of Greek colonies that are under Persian rule. And for the longest time, they want to be free of Persian rule. Okay? So Parmenion went over with a vanguard, about 10,000 men, to begin the invasion. Okay? Okay? And Philip was about to go over and lead the invasion, but his daughter was about to get married. Okay, so he had to attend the wedding. At the wedding, he had one bodyguard because at the wedding there'll be lots of Greek diplomats, right? So he wanted to appear approachable. So he didn't have his entire bodyguard in place. He had one bodyguard. Okay, his bodyguard took his sword and stabbed him in the rib, killing him. And then his bodyguard was killed by the other bodyguards. So Philip was assassinated before he could launch his invasion of Persia. Okay? And when he died, it was like 337, okay? Okay, so Philip was really in the prime of his life. He had like 30, 40 years of military conquest to go. Okay? He died very young. And his son, Alexander, who was like 18, 19 at this time, he now became king. It was Alexander who would lead his army into Persia and conquer all Persia and move all the way to India, or Pakistan, really. Okay? So for the longest time, historians do not know what happened. How is it possible for this great man, Philip II, to be assassinated in the prime of his life? All right? Now, there are three explanations. There are three major explanations. The first explanation is it was Persia. Persia knew that Philip was about to invade, and so they hired the bodyguard to kill him, okay? That's the first explanation. Second explanation is it was personal. So the story is very complicated, but apparently the bodyguard and Philip were lovers, okay? They were homosexual lovers. And then Philip found someone else, and the bodyguard became very jealous. And so it's a very complicated story, okay? It was personal. And then there's one more explanation. The other explanation was it was the mother of Alexander, Olympias, and Alexander, okay? Right? So these are the three explanations. So if you want to, and honestly, we'll never ever know what happened, okay? But if you want to evaluate a murder, you always look at two things. Look at opportunity. Who had the chance to kill him? You look at motive. Okay? Do you understand? So if you look at these two things, let's evaluate all three possibilities. Persia. Okay, it had the motive, but it didn't have the opportunity. Do you understand? How could it access Philip's inner court, right? And Philip's not a dumb guy. He would know exactly who to trust and who not to trust. And usually, if Persia was afraid of Philip, what they could do was basically give Sparta and Athens all our money to attack Philip, right? So I don't think it's Persia. I think most people agree it was not Persia, okay? Second possibility is it was personal. And that's kind of strange, right? Because Philip, he's very good at inspiring loyalty from others. He's also good at reading people, right? So I don't think it was personal. I mean, it could be, but I don't think it is, okay? And this leaves us the possibility of Olympias and Alexander. And here it makes sense because they both have both the motive and the opportunity, okay? So let me first explain motive. The motive is very easy, okay, to understand. If Philip were to die, Alexander would become king, right? And this is at the height of the glory of Macedon. They have the world's greatest military. They conquered all of Greece. Persia is an easy target, okay? And maybe they were afraid that if Philip goes to Persia, it'll be too late. The other problem is Philip is an excellent judge of character. And what's clear about Alexander, from a very early age, is he was a very violent young man. He couldn't really control his emotions. If you're Philip, right, you're kind of like, do I really want this guy to be the heir to my empire? Could he manage the empire? Plus, remember, Philip has a lot of wives, right? So over time, he could have new sons. Okay? Does that make sense? So the motive is very clear. And the opportunity makes sense because they're all one family, right? The bodyguard is in constant communication with Olympias. Okay? And what gives evidence? What provides evidence for this line of thinking is after the death of Philip's bodyguard named Pausanias, Olympias actually made a monument to him. Okay? And next class, when we look at the life of Alexander, we will see a lot of evidence that suggests he wanted his father dead. Okay? Maybe he didn't participate in the killing of his father, in the plotting of the assassination, but he clearly wanted his father dead. Okay? And next class, we will discuss this. All right? So, does it make sense to you? Okay? And again, what we will understand is this pattern of a great man emerging who creates a revolution that transforms the world. It will repeat itself in this way many times, including with Muhammad and with Genghis Khan, with Napoleon, with Julius Caesar, okay? But they all have this sort of similar personality, and they're all working within a similar social context. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions so far about this?
You mentioned like Philip was sent to Thebes.
That's right.
As a
Hostage. That's right.
Then why would they tell him so much knowledge about the military? Wouldn't they be afraid that when he goes back in the throne,
That's a great question. Okay. So the question, why did they treat Philip so well, and why did they give him so much knowledge? And the answer is, first of all, no one thinks Macedon will ever be a threat. Do you understand? No one takes Macedon seriously. It's like today, no one would take North Korea seriously, right? You understand? Everyone thinks in East Asia, the major powers are China and Japan. And everyone thinks North Korea is a complete joke, okay? This place will collapse in 5 years' time. So no one during this time ever thought Macedon could ever challenge Sparta or Athens or Thebes. Okay? No one did. Okay? So it's this overconfidence. Second thing is, if you're the Thebans, you want your enemies are Sparta and Athens, okay? So you want to build allies. The best way to build allies is by building strong relationships with weaker nations who then rely on you, right? And the best way to do that is by indoctrinating the future leaders of that nation, right? Like Philip. So basically, they wanted to treat him nice, so Philip would be thankful to Thebes. They didn't realize Philip had other intentions, okay? And it's impossible because Philip is one of these individuals, these men who we call great men of history. They stand outside of history. They are in many ways not human, okay? They don't behave normal humans behave, right? Normally, if you're a prince, you just want to have a good time, right? You just want to enjoy your wealth. You want to promote your friends, right? And you want personal glory. But Philip wanted to change the world. And so you can't possibly predict that, right? Okay, does that make sense? Yeah. All right. Okay, great question though. Okay, any more questions?
I didn't quite get how did Philip kind of improve on the phalanx?
Oh, great question. Okay, the phalanx. All right. Okay, so Philip not only learned military strategy from Thebes, but he was also a military innovator. Okay? So he made a lot of changes to the phalanx. So the phalanx, it's very strong, but there are a lot of issues with it. Okay? The first major issue with it is it's not very mobile because everyone's carrying heavy armor. So the first thing that Philip did was he made he lightened the load. Okay? So he had his soldiers wear less armor. Then the question then is, well, if you wear less armor, then how do you protect yourself? And the answer is two things, okay, he did. The first thing he did was he made the spear very long. It became a pike, okay? So it became very hard to reach the phalanx because the spear was in the way, okay? The pike was in the way. And the other thing that he did was he added a new unit called shield bearers. Okay, so the shield bearers were on the flanks, were on the sides to protect the phalanx. Okay, so that's how he improved the phalanx. And so when the Macedonian phalanx came into contact with the Greek phalanx, the Macedonian phalanx proved superior because of these innovations. Okay, remember they were lighter, they could move around faster, and they had longer spears. Okay, so they could maintain distance from you a lot longer, and also they had these shield bearers who were mobile and could adapt to situations. Okay, so if one part of the phalanx was being threatened, then the shield bearers could converge on that and like basically lick that down. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah. Right? So what made Philip such a genius was he was very flexible. Okay? He was always looking at what happened at battles and making adjustments in order to become stronger. And that's why his soldiers were so loyal to him, because he was such a great general. And he put the lives of his men first and foremost, okay? And what we will discover next class is Alexander is the complete opposite. He's always risking the lives of his men. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, any more questions? But that's a great question, yeah, sorry. So I obviously don't have enough time to go into all the details, okay? There's a lot of changes, okay? But the phalanx is a major innovation.
But wouldn't this make them vulnerable to weapons such as what if the enemy launches arrows to them?
Right. You have the shield bearers in place.
What about above you?
Excuse me?
It's above you.
Above you?
Yeah.
Okay, well, they have helmets, and they have shields as well. Okay, do you understand?
So the shield is really mobile.
That's right. Yeah, so the shield bearers were really the secret sauce of the Macedonian army, okay? Because the shield bearers were meant to resolve any issues that might arise in battle. Yeah, but yeah. Do you understand how this works? Okay. Again, but you have the flexibility because these are extremely disciplined and loyal men. Okay. And what we will discover is when we get to Alexander is even though Alexander was bold and aggressive, he would make mistakes, but the loyalty and discipline of the Macedonian army would compensate for a lot of his strategic mistakes, okay? Does that make sense? Great. Any more questions? No, okay, so was this interesting for you? Yeah. Okay, and this is clear, right? Okay, because again, the thing about this class that's different is we build on all this knowledge, okay? We will see how military strategy changes over time. And we'll see how the Greeks, the Macedons, will influence Greek culture, okay? All right. So next class, we will do Alexander the Great.